It started on an ordinary evening, the kind where the world feels dimly lit, and you almost believe nothing can change. Rain pressed against the windows, steady and polite, as if it didn't want to intrude. My house smelled faintly of coffee and cedar polish. Familiar, contained, safe. I'd spent years building that kind of safety. Then he arrived. He was late by 10 minutes, just enough to make me notice. When I opened the door, he was there with an apologetic smile, shoulders damp from the rain, a box tucked under one arm, a backpack slung over the other. His hair was a little too long, dark strands curling against his forehead. 22, maybe 23, that sort of age that carries equal parts uncertainty and hunger. "You must be Mrs. Hale," he said, voice soft, like he was afraid of echoing. I didn't correct him right away. There's something about being called Mrs. when you're not anymore. It's both sting and armor. "Just Elena," I said finally, stepping aside. "Come in before you drown." He laughed, that easy, boyish kind of laugh that people who haven't yet learned heartbreak carry in their chest. The warmth of it followed him inside. The spare unit downstairs was small, but clean. Hardwood floors, white curtains, the faint hum of the radiator. I'd rented it for extra income, not company, but from the moment he walked in, I felt the air shift. Not in a way that could be seen or measured, just felt. Like the temperature had changed, though the thermostat hadn't moved. He dropped his bag by the couch and looked around. "This place is beautiful, feels lived in." "I do live here," I said. "Upstairs." He smiled again, softer now. Lucky me. I told myself he didn't mean it the way it sounded. At least, not yet. He was polite, helpful, the kind of tenant you almost forget you have. Almost. He'd leave rent envelopes folded neatly under a ceramic mug on the counter. Sometimes he'd fix things before I even knew they were broken. A loose doorknob, a leaky tap. Once I found a small bouquet of daisies by my door with a note that said, "For the woman who keeps this place standing, I told myself it was just kindness." But I caught myself touching the petals longer than necessary, my breath snagging on the faint trace of something. Gratitude, or the dangerous edge of want. Days became a rhythm of avoidance and proximity. He'd be outside in the mornings, jogging past my window, that loose white t-shirt clinging to him in the fog. I'd be in the kitchen, pretending to read, my eyes betraying me to the glass. Sometimes when our eyes met, he'd slow down, just slightly. A silent acknowledgement. Then he'd keep running, leaving me with the ghost of his smile and a heart I pretended wasn't racing. The first real crack came one Sunday afternoon. I'd been in the garden, pruning roses that no longer bloomed the way they used to. He appeared at the gate, hair damp from a shower, hands in his pockets. "Need help?" "I've got it," I said, though the shears trembled a little in my hand. He ignored the answer and stepped inside anyway. The space between us filled with the scent of earth and cut stems. His shadow fell over mine as he reached for the next branch. His arm brushed against my shoulder, light, accidental, devastating. "Careful," I murmured. "Those thorns don't forgive easily." He looked at me then, really looked, his gaze steady, unguarded, too honest. "I'm not afraid of a little pain." Something unspoken passed between us, the kind of silence that burns hotter than words. I stepped back, exhaled, forced composure into my voice. "I'll make tea," I said, retreating before he could see the tremor in my hands. Inside, I set the kettle down a little too hard. My reflection in the kitchen window was flushed. Not with embarrassment, but with something older, darker, alive. I had forgotten what that looked like. He came in moments later, hovering near the counter, unsure where to stand. I poured the tea, careful not to meet his eyes. But he kept watching me, that quiet, focused way some men do when they want to memorize the details they shouldn't. "You always seem so calm," he said. "Like nothing ever gets to you." I smiled faintly. "That's the trick, isn't it? Make it look easy." His gaze lingered, the corner of his mouth lifting. "I don't think it's easy. I think you've just had to be stronger than most." The words hit too close. I felt them slip beneath my skin, stirring things I'd buried under years of order and discipline. "Finish your tea," I said softly. "It's getting cold," he did. But when he set the cup down, his fingers brushed mine, brief, electric. Neither of us moved for a breath too long. That night I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, the air too still. Every sound, the creak of a floorboard, the whisper of wind, felt like his name. I told myself it was loneliness playing tricks on me, that it was just the echo of his presence downstairs, the rhythm of his life beneath mine. But I knew better. Desire doesn't need invitation. It only needs a moment of weakness. The next morning, when I saw him leaving for work, we both hesitated. He was buttoning his shirt, hair still wet, and for a second, he looked almost boyish, like someone you could forgive for wanting too much. "Morning," I said. "Morning." He paused, eyes flicking to mine. "You didn't sleep either, did you?" My breath caught. "How would you know that?" He smiled, faint and knowing. "You left the kitchen light on all night. I saw it from my window." I tried to laugh, to turn it into something harmless, old habit, but his voice dropped low, quiet enough to undo me. "Then I guess I'm not the only one who keeps thinking about things they shouldn't." From that day, every encounter became a negotiation between what I should be and what I was becoming. When he brought in groceries, I found myself standing too close as we unpacked them. When I handed him the spare key, our fingers lingered longer than politeness allowed. Even the air between floors seemed charged, like the house itself was keeping our secret. I tried to remind myself of the difference between age and experience, between discipline and desire. But none of it mattered when he looked at me, really looked, as if I was something rare, something still worth wanting. The final push came one evening when the power went out. Thunder cracked, rain flooding the gutters. The whole neighborhood went dark. I found him on the stairs, flashlight in hand, hair tousled, t-shirt clinging to his skin. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said, though my pulse betrayed me. He offered the flashlight. "You shouldn't be alone in the dark." Something in his tone made me stop breathing for a second. I took the light, our fingers brushing again, that unbearable familiar spark, and for the first time, I didn't pull away. He held my gaze, steady, quiet, almost reverent. The storm raged outside, the air humming between us. There was no touch, no kiss, no confession, only the truth, heavy and undeniable, written in silence. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't harmless anymore. The storm broke that night, but something inside me never settled back into place. When morning came, sunlight spilled across the floor as if nothing had happened, except everything had. The air still carried the echo of what hadn't been said, of glances that had lasted too long. I avoided him for 2 days. I told myself it was about boundaries, professionalism, control, but really, I was afraid of how easily I could want again. On the 3rd morning, I found a note at my door. Coffee on the porch? No expectations, just rain-free weather. It shouldn't have made my pulse quicken, but it did. I stood there too long, reading those words until the ink felt warm beneath my thumb. He was waiting outside, leaning against the railing, sunlight threading through his hair. The world felt newly washed, colors sharper after the rain. I brought 2 mugs, careful to keep my hands steady. "You came," he said, smiling the way someone does when they weren't sure hope would work. "It's my porch," I answered, setting his cup down. I was bound to show up eventually. He laughed, then fell quiet. We both stared out at the trees, listening to the hum of life resuming. Birds, cars, distant voices. It should have been peaceful, but my body was too aware of his presence beside me. After a long silence, he said softly, "You keep pretending I'm just a tenant." "I don't pretend," I said, though the words felt brittle. He turned to face me. "Then why do you flinch every time I get too close?" I didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound like a lie, so I looked away. He exhaled, slow, steady. "You don't have to be afraid of me, Elena." His voice was calm. but there was a depth in it that pulled at something deep inside me. I almost told him the truth, that it wasn't him I feared, but what he made me feel. The undoing, the remembering. Instead, I said, "You should be careful what you want." And what if I already am? That evening, I heard him playing guitar downstairs. The melody drifted up through the floorboards, low, haunting, intimate. It wasn't perfect, but it carried warmth, vulnerability, something raw that reached me in places I'd long walled off. Without meaning to, I found myself at his door. I knocked softly. He looked startled when he opened it, but not displeased. "I didn't know you played," I said. "I don't, really. I'm learning." His smile turned shy. "You want to come in?" For a heartbeat, I hesitated. Then I stepped inside. The space looked different than when I'd rented it to him. Books stacked on the table, an unfinished sketch pinned to the wall, the smell of cedar and soap. He'd made it his own. He gestured toward the couch. "You can sit, you know." I did, folding my hands in my lap like a woman trying to hold herself together. He sat opposite, setting the guitar aside. The silence between us was almost comfortable now, heavy but not hostile. "I used to think you didn't like me much," he said after a moment. "I don't dislike you, but you keep your distance." "I have to." "Why?" The question hung there, fragile and dangerous. I could feel his eyes on me, searching for cracks in my composure. "Because this isn't supposed to matter," I said finally. "You rent a space. I provide one. That's all." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice soft but steady. "Then why does it feel like it matters?" Something in me faltered. The room seemed to shrink, the air thick with what neither of us could say aloud. He was too young, too sincere, too close. And yet I couldn't look away. I stood, intending to leave, to salvage whatever restraint I still had. But when I reached for the door, he said my name. Just that, Elena. It wasn't the sound of it. It was the way he said it. As if the word itself was sacred. I turned, and he was standing there, not touching me, not even moving closer. Just there, waiting. The kind of waiting that strips you of pretense. "Don't," I whispered. He nodded once, but didn't look away. "Okay." But then he smiled, faint, sad, and said, "You always tell yourself you're stronger than what you feel." The words struck deep. I felt something inside me shift, a door I'd kept locked for too long opening with the softest click. Over the next days, everything blurred into almosts. Almost touching, almost confessing, almost falling. He helped me paint the upstairs hallway one afternoon, laughter echoing between the walls. His hand brushed my wrist as he passed the brush, paint smudging my skin like a quiet signature. I could feel his breath when he leaned close to fix the frame I'd hung crookedly. Every accidental touch felt deliberate. Every shared silence spoke too loudly. That night, I stood at my window and watched him through the glow of a desk lamp, his shadow moving across the wall. He looked up suddenly, and our eyes met through the glass. Neither of us turned away. It wasn't about seeing anymore. It was about being seen. The next morning, he brought me breakfast. "Peace offering," he said. "You've been tense all week." "Maybe I have a tenant who makes too much noise," I teased. He laughed. "Or maybe your tenant just makes you feel too much." I froze, mug halfway to my lips. The sunlight caught his face then, open, hopeful, devastatingly young. I should have said something to end it. A warning, a boundary, but the truth caught in my throat, and what came out instead was, "You have no idea what you're getting into." He smiled gently. Maybe I do. And somehow, that made me tremble more. By evening, I'd convinced myself I could still fix it. I decided to return the breakfast plate, to make it an act of closure, not continuation. But when he opened the door, the words dissolved. He looked at me like I was something he'd been waiting for his whole life. Not perfect, just real. We stood there, neither of us speaking, as the last of the daylight slid across the floor. Then, slowly, He reached out, not to touch, but to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers grazed my skin, tentative, reverent. I didn't stop him. The touch was barely there, but it felt like confession. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. I couldn't. The silence that followed wasn't about fear anymore. It was surrender, quiet, inevitable, complete. He didn't move closer. He didn't need to. The gravity between us did the rest. When his hand finally fell away, he exhaled shakily. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," I said, though my voice broke on the words. That night, I dreamed of him, of sunlight and laughter and hands that never quite touched. When I woke, my pillow was damp with tears I hadn't felt fall. In the morning, I found another note under my door. "You don't have to keep pretending. I'm not here to take from you. I just... See you." I pressed the note to my chest, closing my eyes. No one had said that to me in years. Not since before my divorce, before life turned into a series of walls and polite distances. Maybe that's what terrified me most. Not the age difference, not the rules, but being seen again. That evening, I went downstairs. He opened the door before I could knock, as if he'd been waiting. We didn't speak. He just stepped aside, and I walked in. The air was heavy with stillness, a quiet understanding. I sat on the couch. He sat beside me. "Close enough for warmth, far enough for hesitation. You said you see me," I murmured. "What do you see?" He turned to me slowly. "Someone who's still alive, even if she keeps pretending she's not." The words unraveled something in me. My hands trembled. I tried to hide it, but he noticed, gently covering them with his own. His touch was steady, grounding. There was no demand, no rush, just connection. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't see youth or danger or impossibility. "I saw choice. I shouldn't..." I began. "Then don't say it," he whispered. "Just be here." So I was. For one suspended heartbeat, I allowed it, the closeness, the warmth, the terrifying relief of letting go. We sat there as night deepened, our hands intertwined, the world outside fading into quiet. There was no kiss, no vow, just a stillness that felt like the beginning of something neither of us could name yet. That was the night I stopped pretending I could keep this contained. Whatever it was between us, it had already crossed every invisible line, and for the first time in years, I didn't want to go back. I told myself the morning after would return things to normal. It didn't. The world looked sharper, almost cruelly alive. The sky bluer, the light warmer, every ordinary sound too intimate. The distance I had built between myself and feeling, it was gone, like mist burned away by sunlight. I woke early, standing at my window with a cup of coffee I didn't drink. He was outside, barefoot on the porch, talking softly on his phone. He laughed at something, head tilted back, and for a fleeting second I saw not a tenant, not a boy, but a man. One who had quietly taken up space in my life without asking permission, and I wasn't sure I wanted to reclaim it. The shift was subtle at first. I caught myself setting aside his favorite mug when washing dishes, noticing when he came home, listening for his footsteps downstairs. He started leaving the porch light on for me when I returned late. Little things, small kindnesses, invisible threads tying us closer. But the world outside us wasn't blind. The neighbor, Mrs. Porter, began asking careful questions. "Such a sweet young man renting from you," she'd say, with a knowing smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You must feel safe having him around," I laughed it off. "He's polite, responsible." But that night, as I passed her window, I saw her curtains move. Watching. Always watching. I thought I could live with whispers, until the whispers reached him. "I heard them," he said one evening, voice tight. "Your neighbor. She called me your boy, like I'm some kind of..." "Don't," I cut in. "People talk. Let them." He stared at me, jaw tense. "Does it bother you? That they know something's different?" "It bothers me that you care what they say," I replied, though my throat felt dry. He stepped closer, eyes burning with quiet defiance. I don't care what they say. I care what you say. The words landed between us like a confession neither of us was ready to hold. I don't know what this is, I admitted, or what it's supposed to be. He reached for me then, hesitant, reverent. It's real. Isn't that enough? For days after, I tried to convince myself it wasn't. I buried myself in work, in routines, in anything that didn't have his face attached to it. But it was no use. Every small detail of my life had his fingerprints now. The house didn't sound right without his guitar. Mornings felt incomplete without his voice drifting through the kitchen window. I had spent years mastering solitude. Now, the silence only hurt. It was late autumn when the reckoning came. I had an argument with him, a quiet one, the kind that hurts more for its restraint. He'd been offered a job in another city, a step toward everything he'd dreamed of before I ever entered the picture. You should take it, I said. He frowned. You're saying that because you think it's right, not because you want me to. What I want doesn't matter. It does to me. I shook my head. It shouldn't. He laughed softly, bitterly. You always do that. You make me feel like what we have is a mistake you're trying to manage. I looked away. Maybe it is. The silence that followed was unbearable. I thought he'd shout or walk away or beg me to explain, but he didn't. He just looked at me with that quiet pain, the kind that knows when love isn't being denied, but feared. I love you, Elena, he said simply. That's not obsession. It's choice. Then he turned and left before I could find the courage to answer. Days passed. The house felt hollow, stripped of its warmth. I kept expecting to hear his footsteps downstairs, the clatter of dishes, his music bleeding through the floorboards. Instead, there was nothing. Just the hum of the radiator and the soft, accusing tick of the clock. I had wanted control. Instead, I had emptiness. One evening, I found his key on the counter. No note, no message, just the key. I sat beside it for an hour, the weight of it heavier than it should have been. It wasn't loss I felt, not exactly. It was fear, unraveling into something I could no longer hide behind. For so long, I'd prided myself on being composed, untouchable. But he had touched me in ways that had nothing to do with skin and everything to do with truth. I had been seen, and now, without that gaze, I was invisible again. A week later, I drove to the bus station. It was raining again, the same soft, steady kind of rain from the night he first arrived. I told myself I was there by accident, that it was habit or chance. But the truth was, I couldn't bear not knowing if I'd already lost him. And then I saw him, standing under the awning, backpack slung over his shoulder, eyes downcast as if the ground had more answers than I did. For a long moment, I couldn't move. Then I stepped forward. He looked up. Surprise, relief, disbelief, all of it flickered across his face at once. I thought, he started. I know, I said. My voice shook, but I didn't care. I was wrong. He blinked, rain dripping from his lashes. About what? About thinking this was something I could control. About pretending what we have is temporary. It isn't. I took a breath, the truth trembling out of me. I was scared to believe that someone like you could really want someone like me. He dropped his bag and stepped closer. You don't get it, do you? I never wanted anyone like you. I wanted you. The words hit with quiet force. I felt something inside me unclench, the old guilt dissolving like sugar in rain. I don't know what comes next, I whispered. I just know I don't want to keep pretending I don't care. He smiled then, a soft, disbelieving thing. Then don't. So I didn't. I reached for his hand, steady, certain, and this time, I didn't let go. We drove home in silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was peace, the kind that comes after surviving a storm. The rain eased into drizzle by the time we reached the house. The porch light glowed softly, golden against the dark. We stood there for a moment, neither of us moving, as if stepping inside might shatter the fragile calm between us. He turned to me. Are you sure? I nodded. For the first time in years. That night, the house felt different, warmer, alive. He didn't go downstairs right away. We sat together by the window, watching the last of the rain fade into mist. Our hands brushed, then stayed. I used to think love meant control, I said quietly, holding things tight so they wouldn't fall apart. And now I think it means letting go, and trusting they'll still be there. He smiled faintly, squeezing my hand. I'm not going anywhere. For once, I believed him. Outside, dawn began to edge through the clouds. The sky blushed pale gold, spilling light across the floorboards. I rested my head on his shoulder, the world slowing around us. Everything that had once felt impossible now seemed simple. Not perfect, not easy, but real. Later, I found myself on the porch again, the same place where everything began. The air was cool, the garden still wet from rain. He came up behind me, arms slipping around my waist, his breath warm against my neck. Do you regret it? He asked softly. I smiled. Not for a second. He kissed the side of my hair. Good, because I'm not giving the place up. I laughed quietly. I'm starting to think I never had a choice. Maybe you did, he said. You just chose me anyway. The sun broke through the clouds then, light flooding the yard in shimmering gold. For the first time in years, I didn't feel older or lonelier or too much of anything. I just felt alive, seen, loved, and maybe that's what this was always about. Not about age or circumstance or control, but about finding the courage to let myself want again. I turned to him, smiling through tears I didn't bother to hide. Welcome home, I whispered. He smiled back, eyes soft with everything we'd survived. I already am. If this story made your heart ache, pause or believe again. Don't forget to hit heart and click follow. Tell me in the comments, would you have opened the door that night? Or walked away? Your reads, votes, and words mean more than you know. They keep stories like this alive. Thank you for feeling this one with me.